Hey, hello again, everybody. Welcome, music lovers, to Matt and Cheryl's Gen Excellent Playlist. I'm Matt.
I'm Cheryl.
And we continue to plow through the musical history of our generation. We started in 1972. We are nearing the end of 1981. And Cheryl, that means we're almost into the 80s now. When I think of 80s music, like the first band that would come to my mind would be Duran Duran.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the first thing that comes. So 80s music to me represents that second British invasion of the 80s.
Yeah.
That Duran Duran was kind of on the vanguard of.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the MTV explosion and all of these British bands that were kind of rooted in new wave.
Yes.
And all the bright fashions and crazy hairstyles and
right. That all goes along with like what you think of when you think of the 80s.
Right. So when I think of 80s music, I think of like 82 to, kind of mid 80s, 85, 86 maybe. 80 and 81, the music still sounds a lot like late 70s music. It hasn't really changed that much. Now, MTV is starting to take hold. The technology is changing. Digital recording technology is coming in. Synthesizers are becoming more popular. Now you're starting to edge more into the prototypical 80s sounds. And I think 82 is really the first full year of popular music that is kind of firmly in that 80s sound.
Yeah, because there's a lot of bands at this point in 80 and 81 that are just kind of transitioning over to a new sound to synthesizers, and they haven't quite come fully into what they're going to become and what is their most popular era. Like Duran Duran is a great example of that. Their first album came out in 1981.
Yep, the self-titled.
Yeah, and so they are kind of getting into that realm of the new romantic, new wave sound, but that hasn't really been developed yet. They're just kind of on the cusp of that. So I think that there's a lot of bands like that that are sort of just coming into their sound right now, and it won't be till 82 or 83 where they're fully developed.
So the first Duran Duran album, in terms of reflecting their influences, it's more of the artier end of that. I guess like Roxy Music and Japan, I think, was a big influence.
Yes,
on them. Duran Duran was always citing Roxy as an influence, and Japan is not far removed from. They're almost contemporaries, really.
They sound so much like Japan, but it's just so similar. I know they talked about Roxy Music as an influence, but I don't really remember hearing Japan as a reference from them. So I don't know. But yeah, I mean, their first album, the singles on that album are some of their greatest songs.
Yeah.
But a lot of that album is the Nick Rhodes influence with the synthesizers and much more kind of ethereal. And it's interesting, but they're not fully in the pop realm at this point.
The R&B funk influence starts to become more prominent with their next record, with Chic being the prime influence there. And Nile Rodgers actually worked with the band as well. A lot of the songs we've chosen from 1980 and 81 are leading edge 80s sounds, stuff like Gary Newman and Human League, we haven't got to yet. We're going to push their big song back into 82 since it sold a lot of records that year. But also a lot of the sounds we like from 80 and 81 are still kind of rooted in the 70s.
Yeah.
Certainly, my song choice for this episode is even rooted further back than that. It's drawn on doo-wop influences, kind of like a merger of doo-wop and slick West Coast AOR, I guess is the best way to describe it. One-hit wonder by a Canadian band called Chilliwack, and a fondly remembered song called My Girl, in parentheses, Gone, Gone, Gone. Cheryl, your choice for this episode is Hall & Oates, and I feel funny about this. I think the song deserves to be on the playlist, certainly. I mean, it's an iconic song from the era. It was a huge hit, but I like the songs around it more, at this point in time. But we're talking about Hall & Oates and Private Eyes. This is a very interesting band.
Yeah.
And I say band. They're a duo, obviously, Daryl Hall and John Oates.
The most successful duo in pop history.
That's right. Everybody calls them Hall & Oates. I'm going to call them Hall & Oates. They hate that. They are Daryl Hall and John Oates.
Yes.
Yeah. But for the purposes of efficiency, we're just going to refer to them as Hall & Oates because that's what everybody does. But they're interested because they're drawing heavily on 60s soul influences and kind of merging that with rock music and then slathering on a lot of emerging technology, which kind of put them on the cutting edge as far as recording stars in the 1980s with some of the sounds they were getting in the studio. But I call them a band because I think when they really hit their stride, they were a band. Early on, it was Daryl Hall, John Oates as the composers and primary guys working with session musicians.
Mm-hmm.
But once they kind of ditched that and started working with their touring band, and this touring band coalesced around this group of guys who stayed together for a run of albums and classic singles, that's when they really hit their peak as recording artists.
Yeah, when they put together this band, stopped working with session musicians and started producing themselves too. So that's kind of where you have the cutoff. And really, they feel like two separate bands to me, the 70s versus the 80s. Hall & Oates are very tied to Philadelphia and the Philly sound. They both grew up in Philadelphia and both very musical at a young age. Actually, Daryl Hall, his parents are both singers. His mom is actually a singing coach. And so she was, coaching him at a young age, like how to use his diaphragm properly. I mean, when he was like 4 or 5 years old. So he was just completely steeped in music as a youngster.
Destined for a musical career.
Yes, started keyboards at a young age and was always singing like in the church. He grew up in a very mixed race environment. And so he had a lot of influence with R&B and soul music. That's obvious in his vocal style. And where he grew up, bands like The Temptations were huge in his world. He says to me, that was like my Beatles.
Yep. The epitome of cool.
Mm-hmm. And John Oates, I mean, he grew up in the same area, but he kind of came more from a folky background. And he was kind of living a dual music life when he was young because he was playing in R&B bands, but then he was doing the coffee house folk scene on the side. They met at Temple University. They both were in separate bands and they kind of just hit it off and started writing songs together. Now, I will say that I think that a lot of people probably have the impression, and I know I did, that Oates was just kind of like this background guy that, like, what did he do exactly? Like, what was his purpose? I know he plays guitar, he sings backup on all the songs that I'm familiar with, which would be the 80s stuff.
So to use an 80s metaphor, people kind of perceive him as the Andrew Ridgeley of Hall & Oates.
Yes, exactly. Which I have a lot to say about that. If anybody has not watched the Wham documentary, which you should, because it's so great, and you will have a completely different, totally different impression of Andrew, and you will come out loving him. So,
interesting.
Oh, well, that's for sure.
That's many episodes down the road. But
it is. Yeah. But I'm just saying to prepare for that one, you got to watch the documentary.
All right. Well.
So anyway, yeah, that would be the same impression. Or even Simon and Garfunkel. Garfunkel, yes, his voice is iconic and beautiful, and it really complements the music. But, does he write the music? No. So that's kind of how I felt like John Oates was sort of that second in the duo. But, as I'm learning more about them, they wrote songs together. They didn't have like a very rigid writing style. Like some, they'd write separately together, whatever, bring songs and work on them together. But like I said about kind of their two careers, once they started writing songs together, they actually decided to move to New York. And they met Tommy Mottola, who at the time was very early in his career, just starting out, and he agreed to manage them. He actually got them signed to Atlantic. And I don't know if people know who Tommy Mottola is, but
music business titan.
Yes, the head of Sony.
Yeah.
Huge in like Mariah Carey's career.
And they were married for a spell.
They were, yeah. So, I mean, he's one of the biggest music moguls of all time.
Of our lifetime.
Of our lifetime, yes. But at the time, he was just starting out. He was very impressed by them. And, at that time, they had already written a bunch of songs together. So once they got signed to Atlantic, their first album is actually very much like stripped down and folky.
Whole Oates.
Whole Oates. Whole is like Hall and Oates is Oates.
I had never thought of that. That's yeah. That had not occurred. I was thinking the other day, what a dumb. It's just like, let's think of something clever, to to use the word Oates on the album.
To play off Oates' name.
Well, and it never occurred to me that it sounds like Hall. It's a little more clever now.
At first, when I saw that, I thought, oh, that's weird because it almost seems like they're bringing John Oates more into the forefront by
Yeah,
naming the
yeah.
album Oates. But then as I looked at it more, I'm like, oh, well, wait a minute. Hole sounds like Hall. So I guess maybe that's what they were going for.
And here's the kicker. Daryl Hall's real name isn't Hall. It's Hole.
It's Hole. Yeah.
Hohl.
Yes.
So that is a very clever name, as it turns out.
Yes.
I've completely turned 180 degrees on that. So yeah, it's very clever.
Well, it doesn't necessarily make the album any better, though, because it still didn't have any hits.
It's not a bad album,
It's
though,
not
right?
bad. It's just kind of meh.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Right.
So anyway, that album really didn't do anything for them. Then their next album, okay, I really have never listened to their 70s album until I started researching this episode.
Yeah.
But I've known about Abandoned Luncheonette for a long, long time because it's a 5-star album in every record guide. And so I've always
remember seeing that.
Yes. And I've always been curious about it because I'm like, really? What? That's so strange to me because for the longest time, I didn't even realize Hall & Oates had a career in the 70s. I mean, I did know that some of their hits came out from like Sarah Smile and She's Gone, and those were from the 70s, but I didn't realize that they had a full album that anybody really cared about. I think that the respect for this album came much later. At the time, it wasn't a hit.
Yeah.
In fact, She's Gone is on that album, but when it was released in 73, it wasn't a hit. And actually, it did become a number 1 R&B hit for Tavares in 1974. Tavares was on the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack. The Bee Gees' More Than a Woman. That's the song that they have on Saturday Night Fever soundtrack.
But they had a hit with a song called Heaven Must Be Missing an Angel.
Oh, okay. So I've tried to listen to this album several times, and I don't know. It just hasn't quite clicked with me. It does have a very R&B feel to it. And I think that one of the things that these 70s albums, you have John Oates actually singing lead on several songs. And I don't think that Daryl Hall really had become the front man of Hall & Oates. You know, they were still really more equal in that sense.
And what do you think of Oates as a lead vocalist? How would you rate his vocal abilities?
I think he has a good voice. I think it's fine, but it just doesn't it's not interesting.
Not particularly distinctive.
It's not distinctive.
And as we've established many, many times, voices of distinction, very important in iconic records. Voices of distinction.
And he doesn't have the soulfulness behind his voice like Daryl Hall. I mean, Daryl Hall is he has a very special gift vocally. Yes. And I think the other thing about it too is that John Oates sings in a lower register where Daryl Hall is in a higher register, and it just doesn't cut through. Like Daryl's voice on the radio is perfect. I mean, it just cuts through in a way that makes the song, and Oates doesn't have that. So I think that his voice works well as a backup vocalist, and they have a lot of songs where they kind of sing together, or they sing almost like call and response a little bit, and so.
The first Hall & Oates song I remember hearing was their cover of You've Lost That Love and Feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great duo vocal performance. I mean, with Oates taking the Bill Medley part and Hall the Bobby Hatfield high part.
That's a true duet.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that they were doing more of that in the 70s albums. They just really hadn't quite honed in on their style. The next album, War Babies, was produced by Todd Rundgren. I actually really like this album. I prefer.
Well, I figured that would be your gateway to 70s Hall & Oates, a Todd Rundgren production.
Yes, and I had never listened to this album really either. I've listened to it maybe a little bit here and there, but I hadn't really spent any time with it. And I mean, I was playing it the other day, and Mike walked in, and he goes, "Oh, is this Todd Rundgren?" And I was like, "No, but it might as well be because it sounds just like Todd's early 70s albums. Like it could just have fit right into his catalog."
Todd Rundgren, another Philly guy with soul roots.
Yes. And also, oftentimes a very heavy-handed producer. Many of his albums that he's produced really sound like they could be his own albums or Utopia albums or, But this album is kind of where they are starting to sort of move away from that blue-eyed soul sound, and they're getting more into a more rock sound, really. So I think it sort of alienated their early audience. And actually, War Babies kind of remind me a little bit of Elton John's concept albums like Yellow Brick Road and Brown Dirt Cowboy. It sort of has a feel of those albums to me. And Oates sings lead on 3 songs on this album. Daryl Hall hasn't really become like the front man. So the next album If you've ever seen the cover to this album, you will remember it. It's known as the Silver Album, but it might as well be known as like their Glamour Shot album.
Right. Their glam album, or at least on the surface.
Yes, so the cover, they look very androgynous. They're wearing makeup.
And it was an art director that had worked with Bowie, right? That very much in that vein of,
yes,
Bowie's androgynous Ziggy Stardust.
Yeah. Daryl looks so, well, I mean, obviously Oates still has his mustache. So he's got that. But Daryl with his long flowing hair, with the blush. In fact, there's one thing I saw Daryl saying that he looks like the woman that Daryl always wanted to date.
Right.
He's like, I look like the woman I always wanted to date. Anyway, the Silver Album had their first top 10 hit, which was Sarah Smile. And this is actually a very important time period for Daryl Hall, too, because this is when he meets Sarah Allen, who will become his partner, longtime partner, and his writing partner. So Sarah Smile becomes their first top 10 hit. And then their next album, Bigger Than Both of Us, they have their first number one single, Rich Girl. It still has that R&B feel to it, but now they're moving more into the pop realm. So, at this time they've had 4 albums. They now have a number one single. They've had a top 10 hit with Sarah Smile, and they decide to re-release. Actually, I think after Sarah Smile was a hit, they re-released She's Gone. And that also became a hit for them too. So like several years after it had initially come out. So, they're riding high and bringing in big bucks. This is in 1977. Daryl Hall now records his solo album, Sacred Songs, with Robert Fripp. RCA was thinking they wanted him to start a solo career. But when they brought the album to the label, they were just so confused. And they were like, they didn't think that it was commercially viable. So they didn't release it. And it actually didn't come out until 1980. Daryl Hall had sang lead on several of the songs on Robert Fripp's album Exposure, which also was released.
How did that union come about?
I don't really know. It's interesting though, because Robert Fripp also produced and played on Peter Gabriel's album from 77. And he had thought that Sacred Songs, Exposure, and Scratch, Peter Gabriel Scratch, were sort of going to be like a trilogy. But then, they didn't release Sacred Songs. I don't know. It's a very odd pairing. But Fripp is on record saying that he thinks that Daryl Hall is one of the most gifted vocalists he's worked with.
That's not hyperbole.
No. So after Rich Girl was a hit in 76, they have 3 albums that have no hits.
They're not big hits, but they're consistently putting singles in the top 40, but they're not songs that anybody knows. I mean, I don't recall hearing any of these. You're talking about the interim period between the Bigger Than Both of Us album and Voices.
Mm-hmm.
So the late 70s, they had a bunch of songs that made the top 40, and I don't know any of these songs.
Yeah, I don't either.
You never hear them.
No. Going from having a number one to having like a few sort of graze the top 40 and nothing that really makes an impact. After War Babies, they were dropped by Atlantic and then picked up by RCA.
Yeah. None of these songs have ever gained any traction, I think, in latter years. I mean, it's just kind of this lost period of years where they're just kind of treading water for a while. So when Rich Girl was a hit, it was early 77, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was oblivious to it at that time. So really the first time I ever heard a Hall & Oates song would have been the Voices record and You've Lost That Love and Feeling, and then Kiss on Your List.
Kiss on My List. Yeah, that would have been the one I was. And honestly, I don't remember really becoming familiar with Hall & Oates until MTV came around.
Yeah.
And I think that even when you go back and look at their greatest hits or their very best of, there's really nothing from that period.
Rock and Soul Part 1 was the single album greatest hits, their first one, which is just wall-to-wall bangers.
Yes.
But none of those songs are on there.
No. Yeah. No, the only songs that made it from the 70s are Sarah Smile, She's Gone, and Rich Girl. So once we hit 1980, Voices comes out. This is actually where they start writing with Sarah and Jana Allen. So we've got some changes here where they're now writing with them and they're now producing themselves. And I think Voices is the first album where they are no longer working with just session musicians. And they basically put together what would be their band.
I think most of the band kind of came together on voices, and then I think T-Bone Wolk was the last addition.
The bass player.
And
Hmm.
yeah, the bass player. And he
But
came
G.E.
around.
Smith was already working with them.
Right.
And yeah,
Yeah.
they talk about how it was always really tough for them working with session musicians because they never felt like they could have a cohesive sound. So I think that this was really a turning point for them, bringing in Sarah and Jana into their writing circle, having a more cohesive band and producing themselves. And we also now are moving into the 80s. So we've got New Wave as an influence. Kiss on My List was the first song that Daryl Hall wrote with Jana Allen. It was one of those songs where they just tried to make it as simple as possible. And it really is one of the most simple pop songs you'll ever hear. But that's kind of what makes it great. That song went to number one. You Make My Dreams was a number 5 hit. While they were recording Private Eyes, that's when Kiss on My List and You Make My Dreams shot up the charts. So they had already recorded a lot of the album. So then when they were about ready to put this album out, now they're riding high on the charts. And they just continue that with their next album, Private Eyes. This album is slicker than Voices. It definitely feels more produced. This is kind of where they really start to become what everybody knows. And a big part of that is MTV. Now you've got the videos and the whole visual aspect between Daryl Hall, this tall, blonde, dressing like of the era. And then John Oates, this shorter guy, but with the mustache, which is so iconic, you know, the curly dark hair. And you have the really dark hair and the really blonde. And just the duo, them together, creates an image that really, I mean, that image they've been working on since the early days too, but it doesn't really kind of have an impact like it does once they hit MTV. Private Eyes was one of the first videos that really was like heavily rotated on MTV, and it was because it was so early on in the world of making videos. You know, it was like, oh, let's just slap on some trench coats and hats and like let's, you know, go with the theme of the song, and there really isn't a lot behind it. But I think it's what makes those early MTV videos so endearing. They're simple, they're kind of goofy, and they always look like they're really having fun in their videos, and they look like their personalities kind of really come out in that way. You said that you weren't a huge fan of this song, and there are other songs around it that you prefer. I
No,
actually,
I think part of the problem is this song was hugely popular, got played to death. I just prefer a lot of the other singles on either side of it. Not that I don't like it,
mhm.
but I Can't Go For That was the follow up, and I definitely prefer that.
I
That
do
was
too. I
yeah,
love that song, and I actually had a tough time deciding, do I want Private Eyes or I Can't Go For That? Because I think that I Can't Go For That is a better song in a lot of
yeah,
ways, but Private Eyes is so iconic and
it
fits
is.
better on the
Yes.
playlist. And I still love this song too.
And what's the most iconic thing about the song?
The hand
In your
claps?
opinion? Absolutely. The hand claps. And then the video where the hand claps they're not natural sounding. They're digitally enhanced
Yeah.
on the recording. And then in the video, when they do the hand claps, the little light shines in between
Yes.
that that was a clever touch. I mean
It was.
yeah.
Yes. That's one of the things I like the most about this song because it brings in the audience participation. Honestly, the only thing I don't like about this song is the lyrics are kind of creepy. It has a very much like every breath you take vibe to it. Now, a lot of people might know Daryl Hall from his show Live at Daryl's House, and there's an episode where Ben Folds is doing Private Eyes. I guess on the show when they have guests, the guests will do like a couple of their songs and then they'll do a few Hall and Oates songs or Daryl Hall songs. So he wanted to do Private Eyes. So they do a version of this song that's kind of a little like loungy. And I was like, oh, it actually makes it more creepy because it's like private eyes. Watch, when you slow it down, it just really ups the creep factor. So this song needs to be upbeat. It needs to be in the style that it is originally recorded to not focus too much on how the lyrics feel a little bit creepy.
I'm turning the song over in my mind, and I think what's kind of worn out for me is the chorus.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, and that's the iconic part of the private eyes are watching you. They see your. I love the verses in that. the piano, and Daryl Hall's just such a great singer. I mean, he can sing anything
Yes.
well and make it electrifying. But it's just I'm worn out on the chorus, I think.
Yeah,
I
I
guess
mean, it
it's
gets a
just
little
it's such a
repetitive.
goofy
It's
kind
sort
of
of
simplistic.
goofy.
Yeah.
But I do think that this is where you start to really get the sense that, I mean, like you said about Daryl Hall's vocals, I love his voice so much in this song.
So good. Yeah.
And I think that as you go forward, and I think that John Oates realized that Daryl is now really the front man. And every song that you see on their collections, their greatest hits, they're all sung by Daryl Hall. Every hit, every song that's where I think you get the impression that John Oates is just sort of in the background.
Yeah.
But he's still writing songs. They're still writing songs together. Although Private Eyes, John Oates does not have writing credit on this song.
And the fact remains, I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty certain that all of their most iconic songs, their biggest hits,
Yes.
are either collaborations between Hall and Oates or just Daryl Hall or Hall with one of the Allens.
Allens. Yeah. Yep. It's true.
Oates does not have any sole writing credits that were hits.
No, he does not. And most of the songs that were sole writing credits for him, he sang.
Yeah.
So, yeah, none of those were hits. I think that Daryl Hall just knows how to write a hit song. He just really knows how to write a hit song. And, sometimes on his own, sometimes collaborating, but he has his hand in all of their hits for sure.
And in latter years, again, my my impressions of him have soured somewhat. Super gifted, super talented, no question. But it seems like he's going through great pains to kind of separate himself. It's like it just irks him to no end that he is forever linked to this other guy. And I feel like he's trying way too hard to show everyone, no, I'm the guy who wrote all the hits. I'm really the talent here.
I have to say that I don't feel like that started to happen until recently,
Right.
when John Oates decided that he wanted to sell his portion of the songwriting under Daryl Hall's nose, is what he says, that that there was no discussion about this, that he just came out and said he wanted to sell his portion of the song, which is half of their songwriting. And so, Daryl was like, hey, and the other piece of this too is that even like way back early on when they started having hits in the 70s, Daryl Hall has a very jaded view, which for good reason, of the music business. And he really had a hard time being part of that machine of pop stardom. It was very difficult for him.
I think, again, this is just my interpretation for what it's worth. The perception of Hall & Oates, they're not cool. They've never been cool, and particularly their 80s image. And Hall, it's kind of embarrassing to look at him in a lot of points during the 80s, his style choices and his hairstyles and his clothes and the way he comported himself on stage. Yeah. Very uncool. Yeah. And I think that rankles him because, here's a guy who shouldn't have to try very hard. He's got incredible vocal skills. Mm-hmm. He's a super talented musician, a great writer. He's a tall, blonde, good-looking guy. He shouldn't have to try that hard. But it's like, dude, you're trying too hard. You're trying too hard to be cool, and it's super uncool.
I think they both regret that, actually.
He cannot divest himself from his past because MTV, that's the dark side, or one of the dark sides of MTV is all of this music is now tied to this visual image, and he can never escape that, which is tragic because these are great songs. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't have your impression of the music affected by these dated images.
And bands at this time were, because of MTV, really forced to have an image, and it became inextricably tied to them.
They played the game for too long. They played the game. They let other people dictate to them how they were going to present themselves. And I think it's to his eternal frustration.
And they also are one of those stories in rock and roll where they were being taken advantage of, and they weren't making the money they should have, and they weren't paying attention to the financial side. And they talk about that in later years, that it's one of their biggest regrets, and also the two things they talk about are financially and allowing their image to really be solidified by the 80s, and they couldn't get away from that.
Yeah.
Private Eyes becomes a huge album for them. Their next album, H2O, just as big or bigger. And then they have an album that comes out in 84, the one that has Out of Touch was a big hit for
Big
them.
Bam Boom.
Can you get any more 80s than that?
Right. Well, what an apt title when you listen to the drums.
Oh my God, yes. The video for Out of Touch, I don't know if you remember it, but the drummer is on this huge, massive drum kit playing sticks that are like a 2x4.
It's one of those things, and this is something I've been very cognizant of working in the entertainment industry. Your integrity as a performer, as an artist, your legacy, I mean, that's all you've got in the end. And the acts from that era that are now looked upon as cool, they didn't allow those market forces to push them in these directions that they later regretted. So, Hall & Oates, they were going for it. They were going for big stardom.
And they found it.
Right. But, it's sad. It's sad because there's so many great songs, such great talent, great band. People don't think of Hall & Oates as a band. But that band was critical. I mean, G.E. Smith, T-Bone Walk on bass, Mickey Curry on the drums, Charles Duchamp on the horns. Critical in making those great records in the early to mid-'80s. John Cougar's a couple years down the road. My esteem for him has grown steadily over the years. But part of what made him great was the band. Like Hall & Oates, he kicked around, had his image dictated by others for years. Finally,
name changes. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. He finally got control of his image and his sound, and he got this band together that was a great band, and they stayed together for a run of tremendous hit singles and records. That's kind of the same what's happening here with Hall & Oates, but it's that visual aspect that's just, I think it just irks him. Oates seems a little more laid back about it all, but I just think it irks Daryl Hall.
If you look at Oates, his image never changed. He looks exactly the same as he did in 1973.
That's a good point. I mean, Daryl Hall is embracing all of these bad style choices, one after the other in the 80s. And Oates just looks like Oates.
Oates looks like Oates. Like everybody knows exactly what he looks like. And I also think that that's why Daryl Hall is so adamant about the songwriting, keeping his songs, because he already feels like he sold himself out to the music business machine. The only thing he has left are his songs, and he doesn't want to let that go. And he feels slighted by John Oates now, maybe to the point where he's like has a restraining order against him. I don't know, why it's gotten to that point, but it's definitely
sad.
It is sad. And there's, and I can see how for John Oates, he needs to have some security, some financial security, so
Bob Dylan sold his catalog. I mean, if Bob Dylan could sell his publishing catalog, I mean, it's fair game for anybody now. So
I know it really is.
That's just how it is. That's how it is now. That's, it's so hard to make a living in this business now. If you're a legacy artist, I mean, you've got all of this money. Why would you not take it at this point?
Right.
It's your last chance.
And I think that's where John Oates is coming from. But Daryl Hall is really holding out because I think because of what we've mentioned, that he feels regret toward letting his image, his, what he was as a musician be dictated, and it was hard for them because after 1986, they did that Live at the Apollo with the Temptations, which was kind of the pinnacle for them, of their career. They just stopped. They took a break for like 3 years. And then Jana Allen became ill with leukemia, and she ended up passing away in 1993. And that was just so hard on Daryl and Sarah. She was sick for like 3 years. So they actually stopped recording in 1986. They did put out an album in 88 and then another one in 90, but that's about when Jana got sick. Then they didn't record together until 1997. After Big Bam Boom, they never had another hit again. And then they had to sort of work on trying to redevelop a style, again, a new style.
Rehabilitate their image.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, really.
Yeah.
And that was really tough to do. And so now, I mean, I feel like for me personally, I think of Hall & Oates as a greatest hits act, of greatest hits album is what I listen to. I think of their 80s albums. I actually think Voices is the best. It's not as polished.
I definitely prefer Kiss on my list to Private Eyes. That's a great pop
Mm-hmm.
song.
But I still really love the song Private Eyes. I still like all their hits from the albums between 80 and 82.
Yeah.
I love all
Yeah.
their hits.
They're all good. Yep.
But I think as an album, I think Voices is probably the most listenable of those three albums. And, Daryl Hall now is just living the life. He has his show, which would be like the most fun thing in the world to do as a musician. He just has people that he admires and loves, musicians that he respects, and they come on his show. He gets to play with them with his band.
Across the musical spectrum, all kinds of different,
just jamming with these great artists. And I mean, how fun would that be?
And he's still in very good voice.
He is, yeah.
I feel like I've been denigrating. I really don't want to do that because I respect the guy tremendously. The whole legal battle and the schism with Hall and Oates just doesn't sit. I mean, the problem is I'm big Bill Maher fan here. His Real-Time show and his podcast. And he had Daryl Hall on, and it was uncomfortable. It was an uncomfortable interview from start to finish. Maher is a big music fan, and he wants to talk about this stuff. And it's like he just can't stand to have every aspect of his career linked to this other guy. And it's just bristling all the time. And all these references to it, it's just hard to watch.
Is this more current?
Yes.
Okay, see, that's what I'm saying is that up until recently, everything that I saw with them, because they kind of started to get together again in like 2007 or 2008, and they recorded again and they were touring. He never says a negative word about John Oates, even in interviews with just himself.
John Oates was the butt of jokes forever. He was the butt of jokes. Nobody perceives them as equals. Nobody.
No, but I'm saying that Daryl Hall, in everything that I saw up until recently, always made a point to say that he and John wrote songs together. Interviewers would try to bait him, and be like, "Oh, come on, this guy doesn't really, what's up with this guy?" And he would always defend him and say, "No, we wrote together." And so that's what I'm saying is up until recently, he was always really trying to shed light on the fact that they were a duo, they were a team. And I think that now he's backpedaling because he's just so upset about what's happening with their songwriting. And that's mainly it, because I was surprised. I was expecting it to be more like how I see his reactions now. No, he wasn't like that in the past.
We're not in the room. We don't really know what goes on between these two guys. So it's all speculative. But the fact remains, Daryl Hall is a very successful, very wealthy, highly regarded musical artist because of what he did with this other guy. And whatever that chemistry was, it worked. It hit big, and it profited both of them tremendously. Daryl Hall may have had more input into that success, and I think undoubtedly he did. Is he the more talented of the two? Probably. But the fact is, they came together and everything clicked with them working together, their names together, their faces together. Just accept that.
I mean, Daryl Hall has solo albums. Does he have any hits from those albums? No. It's a fact that they made what they did together.
Well, Hall & Oates could easily fill a greatest hits album. The next band we're going to talk about probably couldn't even really fill a side of a greatest hits album. But they hit gold in 1981. Love these one-hit wonders. And technically, they're not a one-hit wonder.
Hey, most of the time we find out that these one-hit wonders are really two-hit wonders.
Right. The band is Chilliwack. The song is My Girl Gone, Gone, Gone. Came out the fall of 81. But they did have a follow-up hit, and I listened to it. I was like, okay, I kind of it sounds familiar. I think I did remember hearing this, but it just maybe never connected it to the group. It's a decent song called I Believe. But My Girl is special, and it's iconic. It's got multiple hooks. It's fondly remembered, I think, by people our age. The band had been plugging along for a long time. The band is called Chilliwack, and if you grew up in Washington like we do, you've probably seen Chilliwack on the map in British Columbia. I don't even know if you would consider it a suburb of Vancouver. It might be a little too far removed to be a suburb, but it's up the Fraser River Valley, east of Vancouver. prior to them calling themselves Chilliwack, I mean, the roots of the band date back into like mid 60s in the psychedelic era. The lead vocalist, Bill Henderson's kind of really the only constant throughout. Turnover of band names and band personnel over the years. They coalesced around the name Chilliwack in 1970. It's a Salish Indian word. Although nobody's from Chilliwack. They're all from Vancouver. They put out a bunch of records. They were kind of more in a prog vein earlier in the 70s, kind of started morphing toward more mainstream sound into the mid-70s and later. Had a few hits in Canada. And actually, they charted several times in the United States, but lower reach as the Billboard Hot 100. Never had a top 40 until the album Want to Be a Star comes out in 81. They had turned over labels several times as well. And at this point, they were kind of in label hell. They were on the Mushroom Records label. Now, if you know anything about Mushroom Records, there's a Mushroom Records in Australia, which is one of the major labels in Australia. This is different. This is in Canada. And it was actually the label that Heart was on before.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I remember the label itself having mushrooms in Heart's albums. Yeah.
Heart's first two records came out under the Mushroom Records label. But the record label owner passed away. There was all these legal hassles. And at the time that they were coming up with this record, they were technically not allowed to be in the studio recording. So they kind of had to sneak in under cover of night surreptitiously to record this stuff. Once they got down decent material, they went out, shopped it around, and got a new label, which ended up being Millennium Records, another small independent label that was best known, actually, for putting out the Star Wars disco album, the Miko Minardo album. So yeah, Millennium, they put out that record. They actually put out the Don McLean record, where he had the hit single with Roy Orbison's Crying. And Since I Don't Have You, that came out on Millennium Records as well. So Chilliwack, just basically this, in America at least, they toured here a bit. They'd had minor hits here, very minor hits, but had any kind of an impact on the U.S. charts. Again, constant turnovers of personnel. At this point in time, the band is essentially a duo. It's really three guys left of the band, but the heart of the band, the composers, Bill Henderson, who's the primary vocalist, and this other guy, multi-instrumentalist named Brian McLeod. So McLeod and Henderson, they decide they're going to go on this fishing trip up the coast, up BC. So they go on this little fishing trip. They're on a boat, and they bring their gear, and McLeod is messing around. He's got this, I think, Fender Rhodes piano that he's messing around with, electric piano. He's playing this little riff, and he's got this kind of vocalizing to it. He's down, 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 to down, down, down. And Henderson's like, oh, that's kind of interesting. It's like, oh, it's nothing. It's like, I think that's something we can work with. So he starts playing around with it, and then it goes from down, down, down to gone, gone, gone. She's been gone so long. And that is the genesis of this song. And it's really rooted in a late 50s, early 60s doo-wop sound. It's got that finger snapping feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
Gone, gone, gone. She's been gone so long. She's been gone, gone.
And it's
gone
a cappella.
So mm-hmm. So then the verses come in. Ever since you left me, da 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 da. Da, 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 da. I mean, you could picture the four guys on a New York street corner harmonizing. There's this kind of same feel to it. Then you get into the chorus. Really, really strong vocal on this. She's gone.
Lead and backup vocals.
Right. Great vocal arrangement. So I said this song is it's kind of like it's a combination of older doo-wop feel with a newer kind of slick West Coast A&R sound. And these guys they're hot players. They're all very accomplished musicians, studio quality caliber players. And it's got that LA feel, that kind of yacht rock, slick studio production to it, hot guitar solo, but it's got all of these aspects to it. And then it really hits the stratosphere toward the end, before the coda of the song, after this guitar solo, where the voice just goes up into the stratosphere. And then you hit the final coda. Henderson is singing in those upper registers, and sublime, just sublime. And it jumped out of the radio, and a lot of people remember it. It never was a huge hit because it's, again, it's on this tiny label that wasn't really equipped to push it. But I mean, this is a song that could have been easily a contender for a number one hit, or at least a top five. It only really just kind of scraped up to 22 on the American charts, although it was a big hit in Canada. It was a number one in Canada.
Well, and I wonder if this is kind of one of those regional things too, because we're so
Yeah.
close to British Columbia. Did we
Mhm.
hear it more in this area than other parts of the country? Because,
Almost certainly. Although the
yeah.
label is back east, Millennium is based on the
Mm,
East Coast, but the band is based on the West Coast of Canada,
mm-hmm.
in Vancouver.
'Cause I definitely remember hearing this on the radio a lot. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
so
sure.
I'm just thinking it probably was played more in this market than maybe other parts of the country.
And it's funny when you were talking about Private Eyes in the video, it hadn't occurred to me yet, but there's a little link between the two songs from the videos because they're both dressed up in these trench coats and hats like
Oh,
Private Eyes. So
yeah.
the song is not autobiographical. It's just something they came up with. They just wrote a bunch of lyrics from scratch to go with the music, and it's just a basic story about my girl's gone. Where is she gone? I got to find her. Blah blah. Maybe she'll hear the song on the radio, and that's all. But in the video, toward the end, he's got his trench coat, he's got his cigarette and the fedora hat, just like just like the Private Eyes video. So there's the link between the two songs.
Well, his
There.
girl is gone. He's got to find her. So, he needs to be a private eye to do that.
She's gone, and that's a tragedy. So you've listened to more, I think, than I have. I mean, I started going through the greatest hits when I was up in Canada a couple of weeks ago for baseball, and I got through about maybe 6 songs. Like, I'm wasting my time here. There just isn't really anything else that interesting here. But as the prog maven, knowing they have some prog roots, I figure maybe you dug a little deeper with Chilliwack.
I meant to go and listen to their earlier stuff and I just never got around to it. I did listen to this album, Want to Be a Star, which is actually kind of a concept album about the music business. And actually, I think it's pretty good. Like, I was like, this actually is kind of interesting. It took me a few times to sort of get into it. And that song doesn't necessarily fit in with the concept. And there's another song on there, like you said, I Believe, which I kind of recognize that too. Like, I sort of remember hearing that song. And that one's more the yacht
familiar.
rock vein. And I like
very
it.
much.
But the rest of the album is a little more rockin', and it's better than just an average album from that era, I think.
Yeah. And this would be another good song. I don't think we really talked about this song when we talked about yacht rock before, but this is another song that would spark a yacht rock debate because I think I Believe definitely landing on the side of yacht rock.
Yeah.
This song, no, I would not call this
No.
yacht rock.
It's a little too on the rock vein of yacht rock. I think I Believe definitely is more of a ballad and it's more laid back. Yeah. To me, yacht rock has to be a little more laid back. The thing about My Girl is that, the hook is that gone, 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 should be gone. So like everybody remembers that part of the song.
That's the main hook. But I mean, a lot of these great songs have multiple hooks, and this is a perfect example of that. Yeah.
This one does too, but I think that really, that's what has given this song longevity. Because if you mention that part of the song, a lot of people are going to know it. They might not remember anything else about that song.
Probably don't remember the band name, the song title, My Girl. What, the Temptations? They cover the Temptations?
Yeah.
No, My Girl. Gone, 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 gone. And then you go, remember, gone, 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 she be gone. Says, oh yeah.
Yeah, so be like, yes, I remember that song.
Yeah, I love that song. Yeah, that's a typical reaction, I think, from
because it is very unique. It does add a uniqueness to the song that makes it memorable, and it's cool. Although I will say, recently I went back and was listening to the song again. I was like, oh, I don't know, do I really like this song? After the third time they do the gone, 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 it kind of gets
wore
a little
you
bit
down.
Like, okay, but you're right. The second half, like the ending of the song, when it goes into the guitar solo and then that kind of like soaring, I was like, okay, actually, that is cool.
So the gone, gone, gone hooks you in right away. The gone, 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 should be gone. So that hooks you in right away. And there's an interesting little side story on that part. So it's Bill Henderson again, who's the front man and lead vocalist, guitar player. He's singing very close mic on that part. And so close to the mic, they said, that the mic would keep shorting out because he's getting all this saliva into the mic part. So he'd get about 5 or 6 seconds in and they'd have to start over again because he's, saturating the mic with his saliva from holding it so close to his mouth. But yeah, that part, the least interesting part of the song is the verse. Ever since you left me, da, 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 da. That's very simple and basic. The chorus is beautiful. She's gone, and that's a tragedy. It's, well, beautifully sung. But then, yeah, you get to that build up before the coda where my girl, my girl. I mean, it's just beautifully sung to
And actually,
take us out.
I
Yeah.
have to say that last part, it does kind of sound like yacht rock at that part. Like that last section could fall more into the yacht rock feel to me. And it really changes the feeling of the song once you get into that section. I do think that the hook is necessary, the Gone Gone hook, because it's, like I said, it's the most memorable part of the song, but they maybe didn't have to do it so many times. Because it's in there 3 different times.
Yeah, it's got all the hallmarks of a great one-hit wonder, although again, not a real one-hit wonder. I mean, one-hit wonder is one top 40 hit technically.
But it's the one song anyone would know from this band.
Yes, it's overshadows everything else they've done. And again, maybe there's some worthy material out there in their deep dark prog past in the early 70s or mid 70s, or
they could be like another Ambrosia, you never know. Where you go back and you realize, oh, actually they're doing some pretty cool stuff here. So I'll have to go back and listen to it. But I don't know.
Again, if I listen to Ambrosia's greatest hits, I'm not going to be like, That's kind of
true.
That was my feeling going through the Chilliwack greatest hits. So that's about as far as I got with them. I didn't even really find a good live performance of My Gone. Have you seen?
I found one, and it was later. It was from like 83 or 84. And it was actually really good. And I was like, oh, wow. Because it took me a long time to find a live version of this song. And I wasn't sure if they were going to be able to hold the vocals in a live setting. And they did. It sounded great. But I think that even though, okay, technically not a one-hit wonder, but really it's kind of a perfect one-hit wonder.
Oh,
because most people, pretty much everyone, does not know this band. They've never heard of the band. They've never heard anything else this band has ever done. I love that kind of a one-hit wonder because it just seems like it kind of just comes out of nowhere and then it never goes away. It's still a song that you would know and recognize now, and you still have no idea who Chilliwack is or anything else they've done. So that to me is a perfect one-hit wonder.
And there's these Canadian bands. Chilliwack is a perfect example. April Wine would be another good one. April Wine, by the way, put out a great song in 1981, their biggest hit in America, Just Between You and Me. Didn't quite make the list for me. We'll talk about our straight tracks in our final 81 episode. But when you go to Canada and listen to the radio, there are rules in Canada for broadcasting that there has to be a certain percentage of Canadian content per hour. So, and that applies to all broadcasters in Canada, radio and television. So if you're an SCTV fan, you remember the McKenzie brothers, Bob and Doug McKenzie?
Take Off.
Those characters, it was lampooning the CanCon rules. It's like, this is our Canadian content, so we're fulfilling. And so they got the most stereotypical Canadian redneck type characters and gave them their own little show on SCTV. That was making fun of CanCon, basically. Okay. So when you go to Canada, you hear all of these songs by these Canadian artists that they're big hit in America, but you didn't realize they had these other songs. Yeah. So if you go up to Vancouver and you listen to FM rock radio for any stretch of time, you'll hear other Chilliwack songs. You'll hear other April Wine songs.
Nick Gilder.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's happened to me. I'm like, what is this cool song? Oh, it's an old Nick Gilder song I've never heard. It's kind of interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's always a fun part of visiting up there. All right, so we're out of time on this episode. We're going to talk about all of our favorite albums, mine, Cheryl's, and Cheryl's husband Mike's. In our final 81 episode, we'll talk about the straight tracks. Mike will pick his favorite song of the year. He's going to get 2 because we vetoed his first choice. So we're going to let him talk about 2 songs. Mm-hmm. So tell Mike to speed it up, Cheryl, please.
Yes.
But we're going to talk about this a little bit too. So Uncut put out this 500 greatest albums of the 80s. And it took me a while to find it on the magazine rack, but I finally did. And to my shock and horror, my album pick for 1981, not only is that not in here, but none of the albums this massively popular band, well-respected band.
Makes no sense. Yes.
None of the albums made the list because this band and this lead singer of this band in particular have had their haters in the music criticism community for years.
But for the top 500, this pretty much negates this list for me. I mean, it just makes it like, no, that
it's an embarrassment.
I can't.
It's an embarrassment. Now, I know this band has its detractors. The singer has its detractors, but we're going to talk about that. And Cheryl, we've already really discussed your favorite album. We've kind of settled on it. We're also going to solidify our playlist, but that's all going to come up in our final episode when Mike joins us. Again, our songs we're adding to the list this week: Hall & Oates, Private Eyes, and Chilliwack, My Girl, Gone, Gone, Gone. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll wrap up 1981 when we next convene. But until then, I'm Matt.
I'm Cheryl.
And this is Matt and Cheryl's Gen Excellent Playlist. Take care, everybody.